So in our online store application, we have decided to represent users who are using our application. So to represent the users, we have created a class called a user with ID, name, and age. And we are going to create a user. You can see that if you try to print the user one object, you see that instead of printing the values for the user object, it is printing some information like this. This is the package name, this is the class name, and it is printing some information like this. So but what we want is we want to print the values for this object, which is ID, name, and age. The reason why it is printing this kind of value here instead of the actual value for ID, name, and ages, because when you call the println function, behind the scenes, Kotlin is calling a function called as toString defined in a class called any. So we know that any is the superclass of all classes in Kotlin. So any class you declare, so if you declare a class called user, and it automatically Kotlin adds this code for you behind the scene. So user is now a subclass of any, and this part here is automatically generated by Kotlin, but you don't see it because this is happening behind the scenes. So what is there inside this class called any? If you open it, you'll see that it's inside the package Kotlin, and this class has three functions. It has a function called equals, and it has a function called hashcode and a function called toString. When you open the any class, you see that it has three functions: equals, hashcode, and toString. So if you want to compare two objects, this equals function can be used, and also the hashcode. Hashcode is if two objects are equal, then the hashcode of both the objects needs to be the same. And then you have the toString function, which is called every time you print the object. So the problem here is that the toString function is implemented in such a way that it prints something like this. But if you want to print the actual values, then you need to override the toString function. So you can override the toString function in your class. So instead of the default implementation, you can say override, and you can override the toString function. And instead of this return super dot toString, you can say return. You can have any kind of implementation the way you want your object to be displayed. So you can have anything inside your toString implementation. All you have to do is override the toString from the any class. So in this example, we have created two objects, user1 and user2. And if you say print the user1, let's print both the objects. You see that it's printing both the objects, and all the values are the same. They have the same ID, the same name, and age. Now This is because you have overridden the toString function. So now if you click on this, it's going to go to this toString of the any, and you'll see on the left side when you hover the mouse, and here you'll see that it's saying is overridden in the user class. It tells you which class has overridden the toString function. When you click on this, it takes you to the function. So sometimes you may want to compare two objects. You may want to find if both the users are the same. We know how to compare integers, but how does Kotlin know what it needs to compare? These are user defined classes. Should it compare the ID, or should it compare name, or should it compare the age? We know how to compare integers. We know how to compare integers like say val x equals 10. It prints false because we know that x is 10, y is 11, so x is not equal to y, so it prints false. But what does it print for user defined objects? What if we want to compare print, we want to compare user 1 with user 2? What is going to be the output? You see that it's printing false even though user 1 and user 2 both have the same value for ID, name, and age. It is still printing false. The reason for this is when you compare two objects using the double equals, it goes to this, the object belongs to the user class, so it would call the default implementation for the equals function. There's this function called equals, and we know that all the classes are going to inherit from the superclass any. Therefore, Kotlin behind the scenes is going to provide a default implementation for equals. And in that default implementation, it does not check the value for ID, name, and age. Instead, it checks the reference. It checks if it is pointing to the same reference. So to understand this, we need to first understand what happens when we say where user 1 equals user. What happens when you create an object? So here we've created two objects, user 1 and user 2. And what happens if we create a third object, user 3, and assign it to user 1?